All right. Well, we'll get started. I want to welcome everybody to the West End Opportunity Partnership meeting. This is Saturday, January 29th, 2022. And my name is David James, and I'm the interim chair of the board. And we'll start and let everybody on the board introduce themselves. We'll start with you there, Mark. My name is Mark Watkins.
My name is Celine Lucia Maria with the Water Lake.
Jim Brown.
Steve Traeger.
David Kaplan. All right, and we also have members online. Hang on.
Gina Dunlap.
Gina,
She'll have to unmute.
Gina, can you unmute and wave your hand and tell everybody who you are? There you go.
Dunlap, Gina
All right.
Dunlap, interim vice chair representing the NAACP.
Thank you. Dawn is up in the front.
I don't see any other board members. Who? No, I
I
don't
don't
think,
see anybody else.
I don't see anybody else, because I have to ask them to unmute.
Oh, Dawn, there in the top left. I'm sorry.
Oh, there she is.
Good afternoon. This is Dawn Wade with Nimbus.
Thank you. All right. So I guess the first thing we'll do is roll call.
Yes. J. Michael Brown,
Present.
Gina Dunlap. Yeah, I got her. Yeah.
There.
Jennifer Hancock. Devon Holt. David James.
Here.
David Kaplan.
Here.
Celine Mutuye Baria.
Here.
Dr. Frank Smith. Steve Traeger.
Here.
Dr. Don Wade on Zoom. Mark Watkins.
Here.
Jeff O'Brien. And Jeff Taylor. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Next up, I don't know if everybody had a chance to go over the minutes from last meeting. You have approval of minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please? I have a motion by Mr. Kaplan, second by Mr. Traeger. Is there any discussion on the minutes or any improvements or deletions or corrections? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes are approved as written. Next, we have committee updates. From Chair Devon Holt, who's not here. Who's the vice chair of that?
Gina's gonna.
Well,
Can you speak to that?
well, everybody who's online right now does not have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. So I was trying to interject in the last few seconds. So Devon is in the waiting room, waiting to be let into the meeting. And we also have Miss Lena Muldoon here, who is sitting in for Jeff O'Brien to keep him informed about our progress. So if she is able to unmute, she will announce and introduce herself. But then Devon should be able to start the presentation on board development.
Thanks, Gina. This is Lena Muldoon with Metro Government. As she stated, Jeff O'Brien can't be here today, but I assist his team and I will be briefing him afterwards.
Thank you, Gina. I'll check with Devon. I don't have a waiting room set up, so I'll see what's going on.
Okay, he may be using a different link. Let me verify that.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to switch to the Finance Committee, and then we'll get back with the Board Development Committee. And so with Finance Committee Chair Steve Traeger.
So finance committee, pretty limited activity. Right now, we're sitting there, we've got, $118,000 in assets. On expenditures, we've got pending, what is it, Rita, 7,700? Let's do that. 70,
On the average monthly expenditures,
yeah.
about 7,300.
Due to pay now for the most recent month.
Through December, it's paid. So, yeah, so we're looking at January. It's gonna be roughly the same for December. The expenses have been pretty stable.
Right. So, we're way below the budget. We talked about, should we set a budget? I mean, our monthly limited expenses are pretty minimal right now. We pay $1,000 a month for rent. And then we pay Rita $62.50, I think it is. And then everything else is, pretty insignificant. So, we were debating whether we try to go forward with the budget now or wait till we have a full board in place. With the finance committee, I believe leaning toward wait till we have a full board in place because, it's not terribly significant at this moment.
That makes sense. Any board members have any questions for Director? No.
Mr. Chair, this is Gina Dunlap.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering about the status of our fundraising,
Yes, ma'am.
if that's part of the report today, or if
Yes,
that's,
ma'am.
Good that you should ask. So the goal from the private sector is 10 million. We're at 6.5 million
6.1.
or 6.1. So we've had some nice size ones come in.
so I guess it's concerned a bit about the status of those funding commitments, some of which are pending, some of which have been awarded, and then some of which a grant agreement has actually been signed.
The last one is
I'm
James.
not sure I understand. I'm sorry.
Dr. Franklin is trying to get in, so I'm trying to help.
Okay, go ahead, Gina. I'll interrupt you.
Yeah, so there's maybe as many as 2 grant agreements that have been, I guess, signed without any board review or conditional or formal approval from the board. And I wanted to raise that as an issue of concern because each one of those arrangements has its own specific conditions and requirements, which, like I say, to date, the board members haven't been made aware of or expressed their level of comfort with accepting the conditions on those grants. So I wanted to raise that as a point of concern.
The latest one is the James Brown Foundation for $2.5 million. I think it came out in the email
I
yesterday.
did. Oh, the whole, what Gina's talking about, she reviewed from her email yesterday. I sent the 2 grants that have been approved that were started by the legislators. It was already in motion.
Right.
Okay, I sent those to the entire board yesterday. So at this point, it's sharing with the board because the legislators, that was already in motion. Those grants were already in process.
Right.
Okay, so that's what she's speaking to,
Okay.
what she's reviewing in her email that everybody got yesterday.
So you said grant agreements?
Yes. To the entire board last night.
I don't see that.
I'll send them to you again.
Cause I'm,
Let me get Dr. Smith in here. So David, I don't know if you want to mention that one as well as the
Yeah.
Jewish Heritage Fund.
So the grant agreement, the James Brown one grant agreement they came in the email last night. I don't know if everybody got a chance to look at it, but it has a long list of conditions to receive the grant. Related to proper use of funds, and that we follow rules of House Bill 321, and that we have a defined organizational structure, that we have a list of the day-to-day duties and operations, that we have the organizations has the capacity to process the managing of loans, grants, investments, and bonds as established by state law. No James Brown Foundation funds may be used for anything directly or indirectly related to performing arts. We must demonstrate to James Brown Foundation that it is carrying out its mission, vision, and purpose as outlined by the law and established by the board of directors by providing a progress report biannually to the foundation, which includes updates on the following: A, initiatives within the development area; B, projects and neighborhood-based or neighborhood-directed initiatives led by other organizations seeking to invest within the development area; C, loans distributed to businesses, individuals, or other organizations seeking to invest within the development area; D, investments in projects that create affordable housing within the development area; and E, a plan for ongoing community outreach and engagement. And a final report on 12/1 of 2028 on fund distribution and community and neighborhood impact. The funds shall be expended by the recipient solely for the purposes consistent with those of the entity described in section 170C of the Internal Revenue Code, 1986, as amended the code in the manner in which complies with all applicable laws. The funds shall not be expended directly or indirectly to carry on propaganda or otherwise attempt to influence legislation, to influence the outcome of public election, or to carry out a voter registration drive, or any grant to an individual for travel, study, or other similar purposes by the individual, or for any grant to another organization. Use of the funds consistent with paragraph 1 shall have to be referred to as permitted use. And then it says time period for the funds. The grants shall be used or applied by the recipient for the permitted use by July 27, 2022. This grant is made conditioned upon satisfaction of this representation by the recipient. If the grant funds are not expended within such time frame, the recipient within 30 days following the period must submit a full and complete report detailing the manner in which the expended funds were allocated, the progress made in accomplishing the purposes of the grant during that period, the reason the recipient was unable to comply with the requirement for the expenditure of the entire grant. Included with the report must be a request for a continuation of the grant for a specific additional amount of time. If this request or a short extension is approved by the foundation, the recipient must continue to submit updates to this report every 30 days. If at the end of the permitted time period, including extensions, the grant funds have not been fully used or applied for the permitted uses, the repayment provisions of the paragraph shall apply.
So may I point out to maybe 3 items of concern with how this agreement is styled. Once it appears to be a commitment to Community Ventures Corporation, which is based out of Lexington. I am aware that they're serving as our fiscal sponsor under the Russell Development Corporation. So I was confused why it wasn't styled as a grant through our actual, funding partner, that being the Russell Development Corporation. 2, the second item under the proper use of funds indicates that we have a deadline from James Graham Brown of achieving 501c3 status by June of this year, which, based on previous conversations with the Finance Committee, I'm not sure is a feasible benchmark for us. And then finally, in the case of the signatures, it is partially executed. I don't see a signature from anyone representing the board or the interim board of the Western Opportunity Partnership, only that of the Chief Executive Officer of Community Ventures. With regard to the other grant agreement, I have no idea who the person that signed that was. And that to me is concerning, given that we are the board members, and yet some unknown entity is signing and accepting the terms and conditions around that funding without our knowledge. Thank you.
All right, let me speak to, I didn't get all of them, Gina, but you can help me out here. So as the board, the interim board knows, Community Ventures is our fiscal partner, okay? Under Community Ventures, you do have the Russell Development Corporation, where our relationship sits. With the James Graham Brown grant agreement, it is actually through Russell Development Corporation. That's where it sits. Kevin Smith, and I forget, maybe Brian on the other signature. On the Jewish Heritage Fund, the way they're set up through the IRS, there's a specific requirement that they have for any charitable organization that they're going to donate to. There's a certain type of requirement, and David, you might be able to help me out here. There's a certain type of requirement that has to be in the Articles of Incorporation. Russell Development Corporation does not fit that, but Community Ventures does. So they had a conversation with us. So for purposes of their grant, it is being signed off through Community Ventures. So the signatures that you see on those agreements are all legitimate people within Community Ventures Corporation, our fiscal partner, along with Russell Development. Regarding the 501c3, that requirement to have our status in place by June. I think the fact that we had that discussion last month and the board approved Frost Brown Todd to move forward, in the 1 to 2 month timeframe that it would take to get that on the plate. I think we should be fine by June 30th. I don't think that would be an issue, whatever the status is going to be. Once the full board is fully constituted, whatever work they've put in place for that month or two will be able to be presented to the full board. And that gives the board, if we're looking at February or March, that gives them March, April, May, and June to make sure that we have that status. And I'm sure in terms of working with their legal team, that if we need to expedite anything, that they will be happy to do that. I think you had maybe 1 or 2 other questions.
Well, I guess just generally the concern is that agreements are being signed on our behalf without our review and approval. I'm not sure that that's best practice for any board-driven organization.
Well, Gina, I don't know what to say to that.
And perhaps the Finance Committee.
Pardon me?
And we don't have, is that addressed? With interim bylaws?
Often people are on documents, but I don't have to file, but that's a bylaws question. You have to have a lawyer look at.
I think we should do that, because I too feel uncomfortable with conversations happening outside of board meetings and then being told something at the board meeting that's been executed or close to executed.
Well, the purpose of, I think, bringing this information to the table is based on the discussions in terms of total transparency. There's a lot that's been going on, excuse me, prior to the board, prior to the interim board being established. So there's a lot of work that was taking place with the legislators, and fundraising was a big part of that. So, you know, if the board does not want the money, that is an open opportunity. Right now, it's just sitting there for the board to figure out what they want to do. I don't think
With the signatures,
either of these organizations would mind taking the money back if anything came up that the board didn't want it. Excuse me, you all got choked on my water. So you understand what I'm saying?
I hear really promote transparency and trust when things are happening outside that we're not aware of until the last minute.
Well, in terms of grants and fundraising in general, that has not been last minute. Gina is the one who brought up last month, when we had the discussion with Mike, that at least what we could do is bring the figure to the table
Right.
as opposed to names. So, you know, we sent the 6.1 figure. Since these two agreements have come to fruition, and I just got the one yesterday that was signed, so that's why I sent them to you yesterday. So it's nothing, nothing is being done in secret or behind your back. The money's sitting there. So if the board decides, when you get the fully constituted board, that you don't want any of this, it's your prerogative to push it back.
So what does the signature mean though? Like, what was the purpose of signing it if the signature doesn't really mean that it's been executed or that we agree to those? Like,
Well, the signature means the money's there, and when you look at it, the requirement from the donors is tied to the legislation. So that's just another layer. When you read it, you don't get the money unless everything, you know, that they've listed in the legislation is supported. So it's a holding pattern, if nothing else.
Who should sign? Who should
Yes.
sign something? Well,
Can I make a couple of comments here? This might be helpful.
Identify yourself, David.
This is David Kaplan. I'm Foundation rep, so I have some understanding of why James Grant Brown and the Jewish Heritage Fund would be asking, you know, for some help on certain conditions. And I was also an attorney, so I have a general comfort level with these kind of conversations, but you know, I can see where there could be some confusion about the distinction between the West End Opportunity Partnership and this fiscal agent.
Mhm.
Now, with this fiscal agent situation, that's a temporary fix because we were not able to receive funds until, I guess, we get the 501c3 status. So that's just a practical barrier. And, you know, we were all thrust into a situation where we had to do things, and then the legislators didn't think of everything. They didn't
Right.
deputize us with temporary 501c3
Right.
status. So that's sort of just a temporary fix. And I view that as a technical issue, but it's no doubt true that some authorized agent of the West End Opportunity Partnership is responsible for reviewing and entering into legal commitments. This Russell Development, I mean, we have an agreement with them, I guess, to be our fiscal agent, so that connects them to us, and there's commitments there, but obviously someone from the West End Opportunity Partnership has to bind to this organization. I saw one signature in that agreement. There's a space, I think, for David James to sign. I don't know if the intention is to sign that at some point, but I would think ordinarily that ultimately, yes, some board member authorized or an executive director, that type of person is ordinarily authorized, but we don't have one really yet. We have that role, but we don't have a permanent, I guess, executive director. But those are the kinds of people who would be authorized to bind this organization. Now, I think the issues that Gina's raising are important because this board is going to have to figure out what the division of labor is between the board, committee members, the chairs, and the professionals who are providing services. And I sense there's a lack of clarity about how exactly that communication is supposed to work and how much disclosures there need to be for the board to fulfill its fiduciary duties. Obviously, the board has to be aware that we're agreeing to accept funds that have conditions on it. The board has to be aware of that. Now, does the board have to review all those agreements in advance individually? No, not necessarily. They can if they want. So I do think it's gonna be important. There's gonna have to be some board education at some point and some agreement among us. How much oversight is there gonna be? I can tell you typically, a board will authorize its chief executive officer to sign documents and enter the legal committees in advance, and the board doesn't necessarily know each different vendor agreement and what's in it. And there has to be that certain amount of trust and oversight, but I think it may be unreasonable for us to expect that in every single case, that it's practical to call a board meeting to go over every agreement. But what I would recommend is that everyone understand who's making decisions,
Right,
what their authority is, or do they have legal counsel
right.
to ask questions, so we can all be comfortable that things are being done correctly. And just, I don't want to talk on forever, but my last comment, so these grant agreements, it seems like there's a lot in them. The way I would look at these is, these are big foundations, they have to comply with law. If they give out money, they're responsible for making sure that it's spent the way that it needs to be spent. So they impose these grant agreements on the recipients. The recipients can't really negotiate those very much. I mean, there could be maybe some back and forth, but we're not really in a position to be able to demand changes to those types of agreements. We just have to make sure we comply with them. And there's a couple things in there, those timeframes, they do concern me a little bit. And I saw that, because we're going to spend $2.5 million by July. But this is where communication comes in, because the James Brown, they have their own legal reasons why they have to say that, because they can't just give out money and just put it in a bank account. Like they have to. So they did build in a safety valve. Well, if you can't spend it by July, you come back and you explain. And so my assumption will be they'll keep extending that as long as it's reasonable, if we have reasons. But that's where it's important. Again, we have to all understand how that works. And also someone, whether it's Rita or David or Gina, has to be in communication with the foundations constantly, just to make sure they're comfortable and they know what we're doing. And there's trust, and so that nobody gets surprised. And so there's the legal documents, but there's also what's the real understanding of what's going on. And that's the most important.
And that's the thing is, one, the full board isn't all together and we haven't had those conversations that you're talking about. What level of oversight do we want to have? What are decisions that can be made this way and that way? Having actual bylaws that have been voted on by the full board, none of that has happened yet. And so I don't know how we can expect for that trust to be built and for those expectations and those, the way that our board functions to be clear, if the full board is not here yet and those conversations have not happened yet. So again, we continue to come up against that inconsistency of what we're saying versus what we're doing. And we're not a full board. Those things haven't been discussed yet, which is why this makes me uncomfortable, because we haven't gotten to that point yet. And yet other parts of the planning are moving full steam ahead when we're still a few steps back. Does that make sense?
Question. I have a question. Thank you, David and Celine, for your comments. Just sort of a general question in terms of process. Did the Finance Committee review the grant agreements before they were signed and assert that they were comfortable taking on all of the conditions of those particular grants?
No.
Yeah. The Finance Committee, Gina, got everybody, the interim board received the agreements last evening in the email when you received yours. So the signed agreements.
So it's like you mentioned, Rita, last month we talked about, showing our progress toward the fundraising goal, even without disclosing who was responsible for those grants. But there's also a nuance between having a funding commitment versus signing the actual agreement of accepting the dollars and the conditions. So I was caught off guard seeing or being made aware of, $1 million grant agreements that had not been reviewed or discussed by anyone on the board. And that's my concern. And I would hope that we would find a way to resolve that. I mean, to some degree, I'm questioning the validity of the agreements that we have on this whole premise and principle, especially lacking a recommendation from our very own Finance Committee. Thank you.
And I think that's probably a good conversation for this interim board to have with the legislators, because like I said, the grant proposals All of that was a part of the fundraising process. It was already put in motion before any of the 12 people here were even thought of. Okay, last spring. So when that's put into motion, you present your grant proposal, then because we have this technicality right now that we don't have a fully constituted board, from a business perspective, in my opinion, for whatever that's worth, you don't just drop the ball and say, because we're not a fully constituted board and because I wasn't involved in submitting the plan, then I want to put this to a halt. To me, that's not practical. And I understand all the nuances. I understand all the concerns. But this is business, and we still have to figure out how we move forward. You know, the requirements that these donors have, they're not off the chart. They're connected to the legislation, and they're connected to best practices from a business standpoint. You know, so how does that become, how do we not work that out?
It becomes I think that the problem here for us, and the reason why there's this level of detail and attention that is being discussed, is because of the weight of what this board can do and the impact that it can have on the community that we are supposed to be making decisions on behalf of. So I understand business-wise, maybe this is how things move, but if we talk about the social impact as well, the impact that everything that we're doing will have on the communities that we'll be in, I think I don't think it hurts to say that we want to be aware and we want to be fully involved in the things that are happening, and we want to wait until there's a full board that can also be involved in these decisions.
Oh, no, I understand what you're saying,
There's
Celine,
at stake
but if
here.
we wait, that's where the challenge, because we have deadlines. We have a June 30th deadline to raise the 10 million. And so this parallel fundraising was going on while the legislation was being put into place. And so we may agree to disagree in terms of how that works. But in my opinion,
If we have a conversation with the legislators and highlight to them the issues and the conflicts that are happening because of the way the legislation was drafted and the things that are happening thereafter, can there not be things that we can address with the legislators that would make this just make a lot more sense and make sure that people feel like they understand what's going on around them?
well, I think that would be another track. I think that would be a third track to have that conversation. But these other two tracks have got to keep moving forward. And I
When you
think
say those two tracks, can you?
I'm talking about the fundraising track and the board, getting this board fully constituted so that we can, move forward with the business at hand.
I think the fundraising is one thing, but then when it comes to the signing of agreements, that's another conversation.
Yeah, that could be another conversation, but I think David just did a good job of explaining how that works. And for example, these dates and deadline, and you all didn't see the email, but Mason with James Fred Brown, there's a line in the email that says, we understand we have these dates, but they've been doing this a long time. They understand that some of them may be a little, outside of our ability to meet. He said, all stay in touch with us, communicate to us, and we will work with you. But I think we have to, it's the board's decision. But this is already in play, and I think we have to move forward. David and I have been in conversation with the donors. I keep him abreast of what's going on. As soon as we get the information, we share it with the board.
Just as much as David knows, I'd like to know as well as a member of his board. I mean, I don't know why there's some things that I'm aware of and some things that I'm not made aware of. I feel like that doesn't really foster trust building.
No, but I think you have some catching up to do because you're the newest person
And that's
on the
okay.
board. Yeah, anytime you want to have a conversation for me to bring you up to date on the history, again, we can do that over with David and myself or with whatever.
It's hard to have conversations about things I'm not aware of, but again, I just think that we just should take a step back and focus on constituting this board. And I guess what I'm saying is, what do these grant agreements mean? Do they mean that they're signed and fully executed, or what are the next steps related to these?
They won't be fully executed, Celine, because there are contingencies. Okay, so we have to meet the contingencies which connect to the legislation. All of it is rolled up into one. One of the contingencies is getting the board fully constituted. So if we don't meet the contingencies, we don't get the money. So you're not committing yourself to anything that you don't have control over, if that makes sense.
It would, if there was no, if these were blank, if these were presented as, these are what the grant agreements will look like, the board should review them and have a discussion.
And going forward, you'll be able to
You
do
have
that.
things to change, you may have some things that we're not
Mhm.
comfortable with. That would be a different message to me.
Mhm.
But the fact that they were presented the night before a board meeting with signatures on them, that's what raises my concern.
Well, I get it, because this is already in play, but going forward, the things, the ideas that you're making can be integrated with the full board. But this is already in play, and I understand some people may not feel like they're up to par on all the nuances. But what can I say?
Deal with it.
You know what I'm saying? No, not deal with it. I mean, I just,
Sounds like-
you're the newest kid on the block, and we just need some more time bringing you up to speed.
So what should we do now? We got somebody who wants to give us $1 million. They have standard documentation. What's the best process where we are now and going forward to make sure the board is properly authorized?
Well,
Steve,
it's-
before we
Yes,
take
sir.
Steve's question, Dawn has had her hand up for some
Okay,
time.
let me have her to come off mute. Hang on, Don. There you go.
Thank you. I guess the question that I have as it pertains to it, I know that prior to the, us 12, like officially meeting, monies have been granted towards it. And we didn't have an opportunity to review it. I don't think those funds can be used until the entire board is established. But maybe there is a moment where we get an opportunity to review. But I think understanding the concerns that Gina and Celine have raised, I would just ask that before Community Ventures signs anything, we look at it as a board to actually maybe modify maybe it's a couple things that we would like to modify. So it's not that we are rejecting, it's more of being transparent and letting the community know. So maybe there is a 30-day lap to be able to say, it looks like David James didn't sign it. So I don't even know if that means like it's officially accepted, but I would just suggest, for transparency and amongst other things, that it's brought before the board. I appreciate you sending it, Ms. Rita, but maybe we can just then say, are there any contingencies that we would maybe like to push back on or accept or add, addendums to this before it's completely agreed upon? And I do agree that the Finance Committee should have an opportunity to review it. But I think in all fairness to the board, there were a lot of funds that were accepted before we ever even met. So I think that it's in so many ways, it's unfair to only criticize this one. We probably should just take some time and look at all of them to see if there are any issues that we should object to and maybe take a second look at. I think that the premise behind it is good, but because of the nature of how all of this has developed, there is some skepticism about it. But I think that we shouldn't unfairly target this one organization or another just because it's now in our purview, whereas we have not questioned anything before this point. So I agree that business has to go on, but that doesn't mean we have to spend $1 of it. It means if there's an issue with some of it, we should push back. And I think that that's our due diligence as board members. But in all honesty, we realistically can't push back until all the board members are on, established anyway. So I think that it's more so transparency. Gina, I appreciate you bringing this forward, but I think we just should have a plan in terms of how we look at it, because certain people will have more purview or more education and tacit knowledge about this than others, including myself. But I think that all money is not good money, and we recognize that. And because of the nature of this situation, I think that we can take a pause and look at it and just say, moving forward, we won't sign anything until we have an opportunity to look at it as a board.
Thank you, Dr. Wade. One of the things I do want to say is that in the material, it clearly explains this money is not like sitting in the bank account. It is an escrow. We can't spend any of it. until such time as the conditions have been met. So the two donors that we're talking about today is the James Graham Brown, which was publicly announced, as well as the Jewish Heritage. Those are the only two donors right now that we have received grant agreements for. Okay, we had not received any prior to this week. They've, they approved them last year and they're finalizing the paperwork is what they're doing. So the money's in escrow, we can't touch it until all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. The other thing that I want to say is that I think what this board is experiencing is a degree of growing pains. And until such time as this board is fully constituted, there's no policy, there's no real policy that's been established by the board. So these things that are coming up, they're all on the list for this board to be able to decide how you're going to function. So I think if we all could just come to the table understanding that it's not going to be perfect, that there's mental baggage that people carry, but that we come together to work and figure out the best way to move forward that works for the majority of the people. I think that would be encouraging.
I agree with you, Ms. Rita. And I think it's a double-edged sword, because if we don't raise the money, then by that time, then there are ramifications of that as well. So I think that I don't think that we are in a position to just completely turn down. I think it's okay to say things are pending until the full board can vote on it from that perspective. But what's the deadline that we have in terms of raising the funds?
June 30th.
June 30th. So I think that if we wait and just say 2 more months, then the likelihood that we can raise all of that in 60 days, I don't think is realistic either. So I don't think we have the opportunity to just sit and wait. I think that it's more so a conversation. And I don't think that either of those organizations would have an issue if we push back or ask to refine some of the language that's in here.
It seems like we got a path forward, and that is, this is a good thing. We got somebody who wants to give us $1 million. And from this point forward, anytime somebody's ready to make a commitment, let's distribute their documentation to the board, give the board a chance to look at it, and then we'll decide whether to go forward.
Okay.
And as it relates to any previous documentation, let's distribute that.
Okay.
Leave it fall here. So this is a good problem. We just, I think we got a good path.
And just for clarification, James Graham Brown is 2.5 million. Jewish Heritage Fund for Excellence is 1 million. The other grant right now, let me go ahead and put this on the table. We talked about it, but the other grant that's pending is from the Legacy Foundation. And that's a $500,000 grant that's pending. The only material we have is the grant proposal. So if anybody wants to see that, just get with me and I'm welcome. I am happy to share that. The James Graham Brown and
Rita,
James Graham, pardon me.
I just wanted to get in a comment in response
Sure.
to what Steve just laid out. And so I'm suggesting that the Finance Committee specifically review all agreements and weigh in on whether or not they should be signed or held so as to provide direction to our fiscal sponsor before they sign on our behalf at a minimum. I think it's impractical that everybody on the board will have, the time and attention to give, but to me that falls, practically under the Finance Committee scope. And so my point is not that we don't want the money. My point is I'm an administrative geek, right? And, taking proper steps in the beginning will help us avoid confusion or, awkwardness or things that have to be undone and redone later. So just in terms of my previous board experience, as David laid out, someone always authorizes, the board always authorizes someone to sign. And I'm just not seeing where any of that authorization happened. And I agree with David, a lot of the language, probably, the funders won't want to change their language because they have a way of doing things. But that's why the agreement can sit unsigned until we have a full board constituted, or, until we put into place measures, that are consistent across the board. Dr. Wade mentioned, the monies that we've already received in donations to date. I have questions about the $30,000 from One West. None of us were involved in authorizing that. And to some degree, they're deciding, are, desiring that that money be paid back. As far as the other interim donations, I'm not aware that they came with any conditions or grant agreement. So the monies that are actually sitting on our books, the donors who made that, I don't think they made us sign agreements. And if they did, then I think that's something else we need to look into. Thank you.
Very fair request. Finance committee, it's very reasonable that we should look at agreement and recommend or not as it relates to signing it. It makes a ton of sense.
Well, Steve, if I could, let me just add one more thing to Gina's comment. Oh,
I'm
okay.
confused. I think we're going. I'm hearing some of the board members saying everyone wants to see the documents, and now it's going back to the finance committee. So what are we doing?
Right.
I feel comfortable with the finance committee reviewing it, and whoever can attend the finance committee and has that desire to be involved on the board can join those meetings.
Perfect.
All right, why don't we do this? I think what I heard Gina make was a motion that the finance committee review the grant agreements prior for approval. Is everybody in favor of that? Please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. All right, thanks, everybody. Anything else, Steve?
No, that's it for the finance committee.
All right. Did we get Devon on?
Yes, he is here somewhere. Let's see, Devon. He was on. There he is.
All right.
I asked him to unmute. Devon, if you would unmute, there you go.
There we go. Sorry about that, guys. My internet here at the house went out, so I had to join on my phone and I couldn't unmute myself. Thank you. Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, very good. I'm sorry, are we doing the a board update? Is that what this is now? I didn't catch that part. Okay, very good. We have started down the path of soliciting for board applications from individuals in the 9 West Louisville neighborhoods. May have been a bit ambitious in our hopes to have that entire process rounded out by our next board meeting in February. I think with a wave of COVID that hit a lot of people unexpectedly, myself included, and took me off the grid for a few weeks. In addition to a much slower response to the application solicitation than we were expecting, we believe we could benefit from having a little bit more additional time to solicit those applications and round out this nominating committee that they will respond to these applications. And so part of what I would love to have happen right now is to have Gina just kind of walk us through what we've received in the way of applications so far, so we get some sense of what's in the pipeline to give everyone an understanding of why we're going to be asking to push the deadline back to receive some of those applications a few more weeks. Gina?
Yes, Devon. Rita, could I have screen share access?
You have it.
No, I don't.
Sorry. Yeah, it says multiple participants can share.
Okay, now I do. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So this is a status report on what's transpired to date. We've received 58 applications as of January 15th, our original date to close the application portal. The average length of residency for the applicants is 15 years and 11 months, ranging from as short as 9 months to as long as 49 years. The average age of the applicants is 48 years of age, with the youngest applicant being 25 years old and the oldest 79. In terms of ethnic identity, we have a majority of people that identify as Black or African American, some biracial, some acknowledging their indigenous lineage, and some identifying as American descendants of slaves, with no response on 2 applicants and 4 white applicants. In terms of gender, the majority, 58.6%, are female, followed by 34.5% male applicants. And then some, because again, we did not ask people to explicitly identify their gender based on the names, it is indeterminate, so we're reporting that as unknown. As far as the split, our situation with owners and renters, 83% of the applicants own their own home. Another 15.3% rent. And there were some people that even indicated that it was neither of the above. So they probably have some maybe familiar or friendly arrangement for their housing. In terms of business owners and operators, we've got, let me move this. We've got 13, almost 14% that say they operate a business and they lease their business space. 28, almost 29% own both their business and the building that they operate from. 25% operate a business, with no physical space. That's a lot of times what we mean by thinking about the future of work, people working remotely and providing services without a building. And then 32% of the applicants said that they do not own a business. We as a board had listed several desirable professional disciplines and expertise. Of the list that we initially proposed, the vast majority of applicants identify with education or academia, some 37%. Let's see, followed by real estate, media and marketing, and then legal or title services. But that gives you an idea of the spread of people who are saying or weighing in, saying that they have the expertise that will be helpful in standing up the board and implementing its business. This is a mere word cloud that just gives you some highlights of what other people were saying, because you weren't limited to one indicator. So if you've got both the legal and the marketing, you could put it in there. But again, academia and education by far is the most frequent discipline noted in the applicant pool. We also asked about people's comfort level with the digital world, the internet, from everything from email and social media to cloud-based computing and video conferencing like we're doing. And generally, I think this is a favorable spread. Certainly, as a board, we're committed to getting people where they feel most comfortable, whether that's they need additional hardware or software, if they need, some coaching on any of those things. This is absolutely not intended to be a barrier, but to lay out our plans and intention with making sure that everyone's comfortable operating in a digital environment. In terms of neighborhood applicants, Chickasaw has 6, Shawnee has 16, Park Hill has 3, Park Duval has 4, Portland has 4, Algonquin/Hallmark has 4, Parkland has 7, Russell has 8, and we received 1 single application for California. There are those who indicated neighborhoods outside of the West End that will need to be reviewed and possibly eliminated from consideration because of the requirement that you reside in one of the 9 West End neighborhoods. And so this is just a recap of our timeline. We've been fully in this process since December 6th, did some community gatherings. We closed the online portal on the 15th, and the balance of our discussion today from the committee is going to be about how we move forward from this point. Before I stop my screen share, are there any questions? All right. I turn it back over to you, to Devon and Celine.
Great information, Gina. I really appreciate that. And for the board's information, I want to be really clear in sharing that I had a really bad bout and fight with COVID that again took me off the grid for several weeks and had me fully inactive from this process. And while I was out, this committee continued to pull together, meet, and sort of manage some of these next steps for us. And so I'm going to ask Celine if she would to talk a little bit about some of the content that she prepared. I think it is going to be helpful for us in moving forward and providing some clarity for some people through this process who were not really certain about what they were applying for and what portion of this work was committed to the advisory committee, the board itself, and the nominating committee. And so, Celine, can you talk a little bit about some of the work that you've done to kind of help provide clarity in that way?
Yes, thank you, Devon. So at the committee meeting on Monday, it was pretty clear to all of us that there was a lot of confusion. There were some folks asking, can I serve as a nominator and serve as a board member? And there were several questions coming up that indicated to me at least that there was just some confusion about what is the difference between an advisory member, a board member, and a nominator. And so we thought that it would be beneficial to provide some education around what those different roles were, so that people can really evaluate how they might best be involved or how they might best serve their community in one of these opportunities. So we prepared some fact sheets that break down the 3 different opportunities for neighborhood members to get involved. We thought that if we could get these fact sheets out to the community, target some places in the various 9 neighborhoods, even have some board involvement in dropping off these packets of information so that we can start to be with the people whose lives are going to impact in many different ways. I thought that would be a great way for us to kind of get that community engagement. So we prepared some fact sheets, but really at the end of the day, we will only be able to use those fact sheets if we determine as a board to extend the process and give people more opportunity to learn about the 3 different roles so that they don't miss a chance to be involved. Additionally, we have at least 13 nominator roles that are not filled at this point. So we should probably discuss, would we move forward without those nominator roles? If we don't move forward, what does that mean? And so I think that's the conversation we wanted to bring today, is that if you decide to extend this process, maybe by 2 weeks is what was suggested in the committee meeting, we might have an opportunity to get this information out. As you saw, there was only 1 application from California. So maybe we can do some more targeted outreach there, so members of that neighborhood are aware of this opportunity or these opportunities. So we wanted to just ask you all what you thought about extending the process, maybe about 2 weeks, to give that chance for more outreach and education.
Well, and what I'd like to offer as we think through this, so that we don't box ourselves in and promise something that we can't deliver at this point, is start with sort of the end in mind, instead of us trying to commit in the way that we had originally planned to nominations for board members of these in these 9 communities at our next meeting in February, that we give ourselves just a tad bit more breathing room and ask that this board receive a recommendation from us to move that to March. And what that would allow us to do is really what Celine is talking about, is give us a little more time to round out these neighborhood nominating groups. We've had several more come in. So I'm pretty confident that in this next week, we should be able to close the loop on those neighborhood nominators. There's only a few remaining spaces that we need to fill. But as Celine said, in communicating the roles and responsibilities of these three specific groups that we're talking about, we'll need a little bit more time to make sure that we communicate and communicate and share the information that she's prepared, and then hopefully do a little bit more to solicit applications from individuals in some of those communities where we had low responses, like the California community. And so in order to do all of that, we didn't want to necessarily put ourselves behind the 8 ball and trust that we could get all of that done by February in a way that gets us a well-rounded response from those 9 communities and an opportunity for the neighborhood nominators to respond to all of that. And so we're asking that we get a little bit more leeway and ask this board to accept a March board meeting date as the date that we would present a slate of candidates to be voted on.
Okay. So first of all, let me say thank you to you all for spending a lot of time and doing a lot of work. That, to me, that seems reasonable, and I'd like to hear what everybody else has to think. Okay.
Sounds cool.
So with that in mind, can everybody look at their calendar for March? And tell me what the 19th or the 26th looks like?
For 19.
For 19th, for David? Just do that for you, I'm sorry.
19. Not good.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go with 26.
Whatever, yeah.
So that I can be. I can't be working.
I can be flexible on both of those dates, so I'm
Either one. Okay, but this marks me. Either one. Dawn?
Is she on? Okay, hang on, here she goes. There you go, unmute.
Thank you. Either one will work.
Okay. So we have one person who can't make it on the 26th.
So I can make.
Okay. All right, so let's do the 26th. Is that okay with everybody?
works,
All right.
yes. Mhm.
Okay.
March.
March 26th, 12 noon, as long as it's okay with the Y. And Rita will work on that. Okay, Vaughn, back to you.
I think that is our report. Am I missing anything else from the committee members that we want to share?
I don't have any idea. I was just listening to what you're saying. Have you all thought about if you can't get actual people that want to be on the board, a conversation or even modifying your proposal to use any of the nominators maybe?
That's what we discussed at the committee meeting, is having a more individualized approach. As you saw from the data, I think it was 16 or so applications from like the Shawnee neighborhood. And there are some neighborhoods that already have 3 nominators, not many, but I think maybe just 1 or 2. So if we get to the point where the neighborhood nominator deadline is done and there may be a neighborhood that doesn't have it all, we allow for the process, the selection process to proceed with what we have, and we don't continue to push things back. If there is a neighborhood that has no nominators, and I think we should figure out what to do in that case.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds logical to me.
Mhm.
Anybody else have any thoughts or comments about this process, where we're at? No, I think you guys are doing a great job, by the way. Okay, old business, DNO update,
The
Rita.
only thing, it's still being worked on. I don't have anything to report today.
Okay. New business. David.
Just really a general comment. I think we've been appropriately focusing on governance, mainly getting the new board members in. That seems like it's been a pretty complex process that's been well handled. We've all been, I think, one thing we haven't spent really much time talking about, just because we've had other things on our plate, is just what are we going to do when the money comes in? And I think, and when the board's fully constituted. You know, I think it's right for us not to make any decisions on that, obviously, until we've got a full board, but I'm a little concerned, and I only have a one-year term, so I'm not going to be here that much longer, but a little concerned just about making sure we can have some rich discussions at some point about, you know, what are the possibilities and what are the parameters that we're going to use to evaluate the direction that we go? What are the community's concerns? How do we intend to address them? So I'm just throwing out that, you know, we should start thinking about that, just so that when the new board members do come on board, that we can immediately start having meaningful conversations. And part of that may be bringing in some third parties to educate us. I've started listening to podcasts and things. I can tell you, Memphis has faced similar issues. There's a traditionally Black neighborhood there, historical neighborhood called Orange Mound. And it was just, the parallels were amazing to me. And that's an example. There are resources like the Urban Institute, you know, University of Louisville probably has folks that could help educate us, and not to indoctrinate us or anything ideological, but just explain to us, you know, what's been done in other communities, what are successes, failures, things to think about. So it would be good just to start building up a database of resources we might use, and some of them are close to home. I know the California Neighborhood Association, and a couple of folks are on here right now. They've done their own analysis, and we've had some conversations, and they've got some things to say. So there may be folks that want to come in and present. So just, I don't have any particular recommendations. I'm just saying that once we get everybody in a room, it would be nice if there was structure and some education. And part of that too, I think, needs not just to be on the substance of what we can do for the community, but just how to be on a board and how to work as a team, and how to collaborate. A lot of folks haven't spent much time on boards, or they've been on dysfunctional boards. So I think it might be good to incorporate something where people come in and understand, okay, what is the executive's role? What's the chair's role? What's the committee's role? When do you defer to a committee? When do you question? You know, and there's no black and white answers to any of that, but I think it would be helpful to have some type of education right off the bat, and we all get together so that folks just understand, okay, how can I do my duty, you know, as a fiduciary, but also work as a team and make good decisions. So I just need to throw out those thoughts, just so maybe we can get some groundwork laid, and so that we're not just kind of looking at each other before wondering what the next step.
Excellent.
That's a good idea, David, because as you know, the legislation requires, once the full board is constituted, that there's specific training. And so the piece about how to function on a board, all of that, as the board can have discussions and maybe start outlining what that training looks like and where you want it to come from. Because that is, like, you know, some of your thoughts have been my thoughts as well. What happens when the board is fully constituted? You know, the training, you know, whether you recruit nationally or locally for your leadership, for your president or for your executive director, those kind of things are good to start thinking about.
Yeah, so why don't we at the February meeting start talking about that, and then planning on for the April meeting, since we'll have everybody, then we do that. So Devon, no pressure. Gina. Hang on, you're muted.
Yeah, go ahead, Gina.
Yeah, I was trying to get your attention on Devon's behalf. He can't unmute himself.
Okay, there you go, Devon.
Thank you.
There we go. I'm sorry. Thank you, Rita. We, I want to make sure we didn't miss an opportunity, David, that we needed to vote as a board to approve the 1 month setback that we offered to the board. for approval of the new board members for us to submit candidates. Is that something that we need to vote on? Or are we good there?
But, so it's a motion from Devon and seconded from David James that we vote to extend to March 26th for the new board members to allow the board development committee opportunity to make sure they can have more engagement with the citizens in the community. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It's official now, Devon. Now you got extra.
All right,
pressure, man.
thank you. Just
Okay.
want to make sure we
So-
follow protocol.
Just one
And-
last point of detail from Gina. The application portal will be opened at the conclusion of this meeting. I will put a link to the application in the chat online.
Very good.
We also put in there that it's gonna be extended for 2 weeks, so everybody knows.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Rita, I have a question, when really being brought up, there seems to be questions about when committee meetings meet, and I know we have public meetings, so can you just go over really quickly, like the process or the timeline when we're scheduling committee meetings and how we make sure that the public is aware of them?
Um,
The process.
Yeah, going forward, we had our first board development public committee meeting last Monday. And so as committee meetings are scheduled going forward, they will be public. So
Is there a certain amount of days in advance that we have to make it public, or is there a specific process for that?
I think according to open meetings, 24 to 48 hours in advance. So I think we don't have any upcoming meetings.
No, we don't.
Okay, so going forward, all committee meetings will be set up as public meetings, just like this board meeting, but they will more than likely be all, on Zoom. We're not, until we get to the point where we have to have a physical place.
And you mentioned is there an email list where people are notified? You mentioned that you'll email.
I have it in our database, the database that we've built up over the last 6 months. I communicate to everybody. They get the public notifications. The media gets the public notifications.
How does someone get added to receive?
Just email, info@westendpartners.org or to my email, rita@westendpartners.org.
Okay, I brought that up because there were questions in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, I can't go off on chat because it
That's fine.
messes up everybody's views. So thank you for doing that.
Any other new business? Next is open platform.
Okay, now I'll take everybody off so they can speak if they want to. Is that how we want to do it? One at a time, okay.
Next is open.
Raise their hand. They can raise their hand and I'll take them off.
Next is open platform. If you raise your hand, you'll be given 5 minutes to make any comments that you wish to make to the board. I just ask that you identify yourself so that we'll know who you are, so we can get back with you if you have questions. Do we have anybody?
If you just raise your hand in your chat, I'll come to you and take you off mute.
We have a person here. Yes, sir.
Oh,
So last week,
Just tell me your name, please.
Mike Legal report.
Mike, welcome.
Last month, we had talked about the financial report being made public with the balance sheet and also all of the amounts pledged as donations. There was discussion verbally at this meeting, but is there anything on paper that is being submitted to the public?
Anything else? We're taking your questions. We're not talking back. We have your name and stuff. We'll get the information that's posted up on the web so everybody can have the question and the answer. Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
okay. Danita has her hand up. Danita, I just asked you to unmute.
Okay, when's the next finance committee meeting?
We don't have one scheduled yet.
Are they held monthly, weekly, what?
As needed.
Yes, as needed. Yeah, did you hear him? I'm sorry.
As needed,
As needed. Mhm.
so you will
And they
let the
will be,
public know.
and they will be made, they will, going forward, they will be set up as public meetings as well when they're scheduled.
Okay,
There hasn't been a lot to go over up until this point, just kind of basic things. So we, going forward, we'll set them up as public meetings. They may not be very long, but at least everyone will have the opportunity to sit in on them.
Just a general comment, because we don't have a full board, the board has not set a year calendar of when committee meetings will be or when board meetings will be until we have a full committee that can make that decision. Next person, please.
Another hand?
Ebony.
Oh, I didn't see it, kind of blended in. There you go, Ebony.
Hi, a couple of questions. Can we get a list of the people who applied for from the community? I think it would be good for us to know, because if there aren't any strong people coming from the community who are able to be independent thinkers and be able to challenge what's happening on the board, then somebody else may want to apply. So is there any way that we can get a list of those names?
Gina or Devon, you might want to speak to that.
Yeah,
Just the
Ebony-
names in terms of,
Ebony, I don't know that we're in a position where we can share that. I mean, that's not information that we told people would be shared publicly. And so at this point, I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing that information with people if they weren't necessarily aware that their applications were going to be shared publicly. What I will say is that we strongly encourage you, regardless of who may or may not have applied, that if you know some strong candidates, to please ask them to apply. We'd love to have them in our pipeline. We'd love them to be considered for this board. And so that would be my offering, is that you guys, you and anyone else who know candidates who might be great board representatives to apply.
I have a slightly different take in response to that, especially given that we are a public corporation and we're inviting people from community to review applications. I would be willing to prepare an information piece that shares information about the applicants, perhaps to have that on the website as a gesture towards more and additional transparency. In particular, we could reach out to all of the applicants to make them aware.
I would want to do that, Gina. Yeah, I would want to make sure we do that first.
you
Yeah.
have to do that.
To
Mhm.
make them aware of our intentions and to get their agreement to be included.
Mhm.
So to me, that's a happy medium between the two, making sure that they're comfortable with their names being out there, and then sharing that information with the general community. Celine and others may have a different take.
I just have one caveat to that. Whatever information we put out there, we need to make sure we redact the information that's required by law. Okay?
I think, are we just talking about putting out names?
Probably names, neighborhood, at a minimum.
Mhm.
I agree. I
But-
think that, if everyone's comfortable with it, then we could let people know.
And if
Actually, came up
we could-
too, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask if somebody could make us aware of what information is required to be redacted, then we'll make sure that that doesn't get disclosed. Okay, thank you.
That's David.
Okay, and is my 5 minutes up yet?
Now you still have 2 minutes.
Okay, so I wanted to ask, how many short are we on the board, on your board, the main board? That's the first question.
I think this is one unfilled.
One. Well, we're one unfilled, well, the 9 neighborhoods plus one, from what the governor pointed.
Okay, and I guess what I'm, I hope this comes out right. But so at the beginning of this meeting, you guys started talking about the streams of funding that were coming in. There were some questions about, why the full board wasn't fully aware of everything that had gone on. And then somewhere later in the meeting, somebody mentioned that because the board is not fully constituted, that certain policies are not in place. But I see that you guys voted on something today. When can you guys vote on making the board fully aware in every single aspect of business that is done for the WEOP? When can you call a vote on that? Because this whole conversation that we've had today is one of the main reasons that you have a plethora of people against this TIF. One of the main reasons, because there's not full disclosure, as much full disclosure as there can be. Everyone is not even working in concert. The board, which we are told, that, we could have part of the community could be on the board. Somebody put in here that nearly 400 people are against the TIF. I suspect that there's probably more than that, but you all are really, the board is really giving us an F grade when it comes to building the confidence in community that you guys are gonna act appropriately when it comes to, the work that you're supposed to be doing. So, I guess I'm rambling right now, but my suggestion would be that you guys, with the quickness, come up with some sort of policy that requires that the board be fully knowledgeable of every single action or that goes on. Because what I've seen today, I'm super scared for my community right now, super scared. Because even if we have other entities working outside of the board space and not in concert with the board, I don't care what kind of way you put it, that is shady to me. I also feel like, just a point of education for you, I've been in many of these, I've been in meeting. Yeah.
Ebony, your time is up. Thank you, but we hear what you're
Yeah,
saying.
but you guys spent a minute of my time. So I just want to say this, when you're speaking to community, don't lead out with, well, it's apparent that many need some education on this. We've heard all that. Community is well aware of what's going on. You guys need to work. This is why we don't trust.
We have one more.
Okay, there's another hand here.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh.
The one in the red.
Okay. We'll be right back to you, Ms. Barbara.
Okay.
She said that you go first.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So please state your name and then.
Go ahead and unmute, Ms. Barbara. There you go.
Hi, I'm Dr. Barbara Bliss, and I'm a resident in Chickasaw. I have a couple of questions for you. Briefly, the West End Opportunity Partnership says that it is committed to revitalization. And what I've experienced with TIFs is that TIFs tend to fund very high dollar value projects that bring a big business into a community. And in Chickasaw, which is mostly a residential community, I have two questions for you. One is, how are you going to measure revitalization in our neighborhood? What does revitalization mean to you? And two, how many businesses and how many existing businesses are there in Chickasaw that you think can be uplifted by the TIF, since we don't really need any high-rise hotels or anything down here? It's a residential neighborhood. So what will revitalization look like here? It's different from what the city of Louisville has offered with repair programs.
We say revitalization for the board is going to be what the board determines that to be, which we don't have a full board yet, so I can't tell you. And as far as existing businesses in Chickasaw, I have no idea how many existing businesses there are in Chickasaw at this particular point.
Okay, maybe the new board, well, I've got 1 more minute. Is there a finance committee now? If so, who is on it?
Committee chair is Steve Traeger with J. Michael Brown and Mark Watkins.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Amira Granger. I'm a resident of Chickasaw neighborhood. Also, I'm president of the Chickasaw Neighborhood Federation, involved in a lot of different other projects. I wanted to make sure I use my time wisely, but I do want to respond to some things. My counterpart here, not from Chickasaw, but from another neighborhood, asked their question. It was not even responded to, and I think that that's not fair for people who are online to be able to ask questions and have them engage and have an individual sit through this meeting and have their question dismissed when it's a legitimate question because it pertains to finance. So hopefully we can circle back and get that answer because it's a question that's been asked time and time again. To my points specifically, earlier you mentioned training for various people. It did come across a bit condescending. I want to ask you though, are community members a part of this team? Because when you talked about that, you talked about the board being a team. And you have community input at the end of the meeting. A lot of times it doesn't seem that those topics translate to the next agenda. And so I ask you to take that on since you mentioned team, and hopefully you understand that the community should be a part of this team, an integral part. It's troubling to me professionally and personally to hear, as a community member, that efforts were out there to seek and secure funding before there was an effort to initiate any critical engagement with West End residents and leadership in the West. And so it's very telling to hear that today. You secured funding and you're concerned about protecting that funding, but not about getting out to the people who will be affected. I'm not sure that I see how these comments will be incorporated, but I do hope that they will impact you all and this agenda in the future will be cognizant of that. I want to say this. On a personal and professional level, my grandparents moved here from rural Kentucky. They came here for opportunity, like many of our families. All of us can relate to that. They moved wherever they went because they wanted to set up their family. People worked really hard in times that were not really favorable to Black men or Black women trying to set up a household and secure and support their family. And so when people worked very hard to build and purchase a home, and then 2 or 3 generations later, that opportunity is posed that really appears as a threat. I have to ask you, if you've looked at this legislation and the loosely way it's constructed, and if you thought about the people who worked for years to buy what they could buy in the city that they could, in the area that they were allowed, and now you come up with presentations or ideas and you still have not presented the numbers. And so just really quick, because anyone can do this. When in your legislation that you're operating, but it mentions that the average income is around $25,000. So if a person, we should talk about this in take-home pay. So let's say, looking at 2 different numbers, $20,000 in take-home pay, $34,000 in take-home pay. So if I make $20,000 take-home, I'm gonna have, if you go by the 50, 30, 20 budgeting expectation, you have needs on 50%, your wants at 30%, your savings at 20. If I make $20,000, I have $833 to spend on needs. I have $500 to spend on wants. I have $333 to spend on saving. Now, you know, with housing costs being high here, cell phone bill, LG&E, other needs that you have to cover, obviously we're gonna encroach on savings, we're gonna encroach on wants. And eventually everything goes under needs. This taxation effort is another wallop to neighbors and residents of the West. And it really doesn't affect you all because most of you all probably don't fall into this financial bracket. Let me go to the $34,000 take-home pay, which doesn't match the legislation. That person might have $1,400 for needs, $850 for wants, $566 for savings. LG&E can be $200 and something for just a month in the winter. So I want you to just consider those numbers that you all haven't put forth. I just sat here on my phone, cranked out a few. It would be nice if this board and those who supported this legislation could present those numbers to the community. It is long past overdue It's been asked for quite some time, and you still have not brought it forth. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just simply say for your answer, the financials will be on the website. As soon as we can get them there. I hope by the end of the week, okay?
Sorry?
By the end of the week.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
and as far as who we are negotiating, donations with, we release that information when they're ready for us to release that information. The donors.
But we're saying that we've got 6.5. I heard 3.5 talked about today. What's the other 3? I know Churchill Downs was one, but I think it would be helpful for the community to see everything listed out. Somebody's got a list.
When we are able to release that information from the donor's perspective, we will do so. All right. Anything else from any other board member? All right.
Wait, there's still someone online.
I'm sorry.
I'm looking, sorry, Martina. There you go, you can unmute. You're good to unmute.
There we go. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. First of all, Rita, I did send you an email about the material I'm sharing with you, so be sure
Okay,
to check
thank
that
you.
out.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, it's taking me so long. I want to say this, I'm Martina Kunicki. I am a West End resident. I'm president of Neighborhood Planning and Preservation, which is supporting the historic Black Neighborhood Assembly in opposing this TIF. This meeting, I have to tell you, reaffirms why I am standing with the HBN Assembly in saying we don't need to dress it up or get answers. We need to stop this thing because it is a mess. And this meeting really illustrated that. I mean, all we had to do is look at a video of this meeting to see what a train wreck this is and how the community is once again being railroaded. I don't know if you all capture the comments in the chat room. I've been trying to take pictures of them because I'm going to be sharing them with the community, with our legislators, with our political leaders, to illustrate the serious questions that have been raised about this effort. Someone in the chat room said this is a disgrace to see this kind of process going on during Black History Month. Well, I kind of agree with them, but also this is the way issues for Black communities have always been handled, through special handpicked groups, through incestuous groups, through a lot of process that gives face validity to bad policy and to aggressive actions against Black and poor communities. So really what we've seen today is textbook in that regard, and maybe it's very appropriate for Black History Month to review these things. A couple of things I want to put forth before the board specifically. I want to thank the board members who questioned so much of what has happened in the process so far, especially the financing piece. I applaud you for asking those questions because the community is certainly asking those questions. I happen to have been one person from the beginning that has believed there will be no problem raising money for this train wreck. That has happened in this community many times before when the elite are driving the process behind the scenes. A lot of what we see is theater. A lot of angst about where we're going to get the money is theater. The money will come. The issue is, where is it coming from? Someone said, no, money is good money. That is absolutely correct. And finally, I want to challenge this board at every meeting to disclose from the get-go how many do live in these 9 neighborhoods. Every meeting you should be saying that. Every meeting you should be telling us what your connection is to One West, to Simmons, to some of these other questionable entities that are on this WIOP board, because the governor made these top-down appointments and he made sure organizations that have historically been the Black voice for, been the voice for the Black community have swallowed up the funds and have delivered virtually nothing in terms of changing the dynamics in the West End. So I'm not going to ramble anymore, but I want you to know that surprisingly, I appreciated this meeting more than I've appreciated any of these meetings, because it illustrates why the HBN Assembly is going to stop this thing. We're not going to try to make it better, not going to try to, you know, empower these committee members from the community that will have no voice. We're going to try to stop this thing. Thank you for the time.
Gina. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, you like that, Parker?